Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Dr. James Doty. He is a neuroscientist, neurosurgeon, Stanford University, best-selling author. His last book was called Into the Magic Shop, which you might have heard of. It was a New York Times bestseller. His latest book is Mind Magic, and it's the neuroscience of manifestation and how understanding it really changes everything. In part 1 of the show, we talked about this woo-woo subject, which is manifestation, and then taking that into neuroscience, taking that into what kinds of systems in the brain are actually being used in order to apply it and actually be able to manifest what it is that you want to look at in your life. There's a lot in there, I promise you. So if you didn't hear part 1, just scroll back through and go back into it. I promise you'll find a lot of great value. James is an outstanding guest. He is a returning champion. And I want to bring up here a part of this because we talked before about people hustling in their everyday lives and often missing what's going on. I want to talk about the value and purpose in everyday life. In my work around the emotional source code and identity addiction, I speak about people sort of hustling to bring about what it is they want to manifest in their lives, only to discover that hitting that goal of 1 million or 100 million or 1 billion leaves a lot of people feeling empty. My clients are people who are enormously successful and end up in a place going, I thought I had it all, but it doesn't mean much. In the book, Magic Mind, you speak about the process of value tagging. So I want people to understand, how does value tagging alter the perception of our decision-making and ways that we can lead a more meaningful manifestation in our lives?
Well, I think there are a couple parts we should address before we get to that. And one of those is that I'm sure you appreciate the reality that you and I and many others who've come from challenging backgrounds carry baggage with us. And unless you've examined that baggage, which are beliefs or habits that have been created many times to protect us, or so we believe, many people repeat the same patterns of behavior over and over and over again. I'm sure you've been in the situation where somebody says, geez, I don't understand this. My wife's filed for a divorce, and she was exactly like the 2 other wives I had married. Why is that? And that's because you've created a bonding or affiliative type of behavior that is very negative based on prior circumstances or other baggage you've created or has been created that affects every decision you make, every job you take, every action you perform. So one of the first things is understanding that reality and having a clear motivation to change the baggage you carry, get rid of it. The other is, which we talked about a little bit, is clarity of your intention. What is it you really want? Again, so many people in Western society get confused by believing external symbols of success somehow equate with happiness. And as you just said, there are many, many people who've been extraordinarily successful and are at the quote-unquote top of the mountain of success who are miserably unhappy. And in fact, for myself, Ruth, the woman in the magic shop, taught me these techniques of visualization, and I used them, but I didn't really understand them or have self-awareness. And I chased after the things that a kid who is poor and not self-aware would do. I wanted a mansion. I wanted $1 million. I wanted to be a doctor so people respected me. I wanted a Rolex. I wanted a Porsche. And in fact, I got every one of those things. And in fact, I was in a situation where I had a mansion overlooking the ocean in Newport Beach, California. I had a penthouse on the top of a building in San Francisco. I had a villa in Florence. I had a Porsche, a Mercedes, a Range Rover, a Ferrari in my garage, and dating beautiful starlets. And I was never more unhappy at any time in my entire life because I was chasing things, but there was no substance to them. It's like you're being fed something that is not nutritious and you always feel empty. And so it was only after, frankly, I ended up losing almost $80 million in 6 weeks during the dot-com crash.
The dot-com.
Yeah. I sat back and reflected on what had happened to me. Where did I make a wrong turn? And it was through this period of reflection. And of course, I had actually borrowed about $15 million during that time. And when you lose $80 million, your banker typically will give you a call. And so I had to deal with him and my lawyer. Now, the interesting thing, and that had a huge impact, was I had made some trusts to deal with tax issues. And it turned out that after speaking to my lawyer, he had not filed this paperwork, or the firm had not. He said, Jim, all that stock you were giving away, you don't have to do so. You can keep it. And I went through this period of reflection to try to understand what was going on, and I realized I was very self-focused. It had not given me what I wanted, and I had allocated all of this stock to charity. So even though every person I talked to said I should not do it, since I was $3 million in the hole, I went ahead and honored that trust, and it turned out I gave $30 million away to charity. But what did it do? I say I went from rags to riches to rags, but really, metaphorically, I went to rags because I was still a neurosurgeon, but I got all of these riches, which were not necessarily in cash. And what I mean by that is I learned a lot about myself. I learned who I was. I learned what was important. I ended up founding the center at Stanford, which has been very fulfilling. The Dalai Lama became the founding benefactor. I became chairman of the Dalai Lama Foundation through him. I met and have become friends with, or an advisor to, many of the leading spiritual and religious leaders, whether it was Pope Francis, Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Sadhguru, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, Radhanath Swami, and a whole slew of other individuals, which gave me an immense understanding and awareness of, if you will, spirituality, combined with my own interest in science. And actually, it has been extraordinarily fulfilling, because what I have found is that when you have the right mental state, when you carry yourself in a certain way, when you are of service, and that is your primary motivation, one, that's the greatest gift to yourself, to be happy. Two, it's the greatest gift you can give to others. And it actually results in your physiology working at its best, and it increases your longevity.
So this is the dichotomy, though, James, with the whole manifestation thing. I remember the whole thing with The Secret, and I wanted to punch myself in the eyes just to stop it, which was these images of people manifesting Porsches and private jets and girls with push-up bras being in the club with your Rolex on and all that nonsense. And I still feel like manifestation has that stink on it, that it's all about manifesting what you physically want. And I think that you brought up an interesting point, which is the need for us to self-examine. So we might be manifesting something, but if we're not self-examined, if we're not self-knowledgeable enough, if we haven't done that work on ourselves, we're manifesting wants as opposed to needs. And needs are often, as you and I talked about last time, much more related to childhood stuff that we need to get met so that we can serve in the world. And so we end up doing these silly manifestations. So talk to me about that from your point of view. People are going to read this and go, oh, it's magic mind, manifestation. Okay, now I'm back on that secret bent, and I'm now trying to manifest the bloody Porsche. Talk to the listener, the viewer who's listening to that and going, well, isn't that it?
Well, this is the problem. In fact, I can't tell you the number of people who have sent me notes like going, well, are you against materialism and you have to be poor to manifest? My statement is, of course not. You can manifest these things. If that is your sole reason for doing so, you're going to be unhappy. But you can also be of service, manifest wonderful things for other people, and get everything you want. And it may be material. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with material things. Listen, I drive a Porsche today. In fact, I drove to my office today in my yellow Targa, and I live in a very nice house. But here's the difference. If the house is gone, the Porsche are gone, all the things, material things are gone tomorrow, my mental state does not change one iota. They're not important. Do I enjoy them? Absolutely. I love them. Nothing's better than driving down a curvy road with the wind blowing in your hair and with a beautiful woman next to you. But if they're gone tomorrow, that's perfectly okay. It's okay. The most important thing is to care for other people, to connect with other people. That's what we evolved to do. That's when our physiology works its best. So this isn't an anti-materialistic rant. Hopefully you understand the difference between the two. And one is driven by insecurity and fear. The other's by acceptance, love, and generosity. And you have to figure out where you're going to be in that world. You can manifest things for good and for bad. And sometimes you realize you spent all this effort and energy and you've got what you didn't want at all, even though that's what you thought at first. So in some ways, what I'm trying to do is to give you some insights about choosing carefully and understanding what you're choosing. The other thing about the book is, and I want to emphasize, this is not meant to say, if you do exactly everything I say, one, it's going to happen in this time frame, or it's going to happen at all, or that it's going to solve all your problems. What this is doing, it's giving you a hint how to maximally manifest for the greatest benefit to you. But it is not a guarantee. It's not a solution to every problem in your life. And it actually requires work. It requires work to examine the life you're already living. It requires work to create habits. You don't wake up one morning and say, I'm going to run a marathon, and then suddenly you're an elite athlete able to run 26 miles. You have to start with baby steps. You have to create these neural pathways. It takes work. It takes repetition. It takes insight. So this is not sort of, I read Jim's book and tomorrow everything is perfect for me. Life does not work that way.
Let's address that, because a lot of the thing around manifestation that is frustrating for people is it seems hit and miss. And what I mean by that is, for certainly some people, they can manifest, like my missus, New Year's, I said to her, what do you want the next year to be about? And she goes, mobility. She's been waiting for 4 years to have knee replacement surgery. So she's like, mobility. I want to make sure I get that date. We've not heard anything for 4 years. The next week, she gets a date to go for surgery. She's amazing. At the same time, other people put a ton of intention into it. And we were talking before about examining your life. We're talking about coming from a particular set of circumstances. And that sets you up, or sets a person up, set me up certainly, for hypervigilance. I'm paying attention to the potential threat because I grew up, as you said, in a war zone. Not literally a war zone, but familiarly a war zone. When you grow up in that environment, the brain, the mind is focused in a specific way to look for threats. That there is a saber-toothed tiger around every corner, psychologically speaking. And sometimes the saber-toothed tiger is the rent man or the bank, could be anything. With that level of intention, that level of focus, that level of neural pathways that have gotten fired together and wired together over a long time, somebody can be 30, 40 years old trying to manifest, and all their brain is going to do is go to those thoughts that are about survival. What do you say to somebody who's like, I really want to understand this, I want to be able to do this, I've done all the techniques, I've even done some therapy, I've done some work, I journaled, and how come I'm not manifesting? In fact, I keep manifesting more of the same shit that I don't want.
Well, first of all, there are structural limiters of people being able to manifest. If you're in an environment that's completely racist and you're a person of color and everything is against you, it's not your fault. Some of us can do everything we can to increase the likelihood of something occurring, and through all sorts of external aspects, it will not happen or does not happen. And that's reality. I cannot cure the ills of the world and make everyone be kind or generous or thoughtful. The world is a harsh, difficult place. All I can do is to set out a program that, with greater than likelihood than not, that you will be able to manifest your intention. But there are no guarantees, and for some people, it will not work. And frankly, there are some people, as much as they say otherwise, and this is not necessarily to be critical to them, it is just not possible to change the pathways that they've laid down that allow them to see the world in a different way. As you know, the brain is extraordinarily powerful. It works at our will, but you have to believe that's the case. What limits most people's behavior, one, is the baggage they already carry and the negative dialogue that tells them, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, it's not possible, or I cannot. Once you use the statement, I cannot, that becomes truth. As we talked about earlier, your brain doesn't know the difference. If you say, I can scale the mountain, then until proven otherwise, you can scale the mountain. But once you say, I cannot scale the mountain, there's nothing you can do to change that. So one of the first things is you have to see the limitations due to your already created baggage or that you carry with you, but also change your limiting beliefs. And it is possible, but again, it takes work. You have to deal with negative self-talk. You have to give yourself positive affirmation. You have to believe in the possibility that things can change. As an example, I'm sure you're familiar with Wim Hof or Buddhist monks who are able to control their body temperature, their heart rate, their blood pressure. These are all possible with mind training. Fundamentally, what we're talking about is learning a type of mind training that allows you to take back your self-agency. And what I mean by that is I'm sure each of you listening, and I think probably both of us, have been in situations where we've been inspired, motivated, and we shout out, we're going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then you'll have either a family member, a friend, a relative, somebody who says, you're not going to be able to do that, that's not possible. And the problem is people believe these narratives from people outside themselves. They have no control over you. They don't control your mind. It is your choice. But once you accept what someone tells you is possible, then it is your choice. So you have to have an understanding that within your control is an extraordinary tool to help you change your life and, frankly, to change the world. You just have to believe it. It is possible. I think my own story, which you can find into the Magic Shop, and there are many similar ones, Dov's story about overcoming hardship. It wasn't because we just sat there and said, oh, it's all going to happen. It takes work. It takes repetition. It takes insight. It takes motivation, and you can do it. But the fundamental thing is you have to believe in unlimited possibilities for yourself.
And I think it's really important for you, if you're in that space. I know I was in that space for a long time where I was stuck. We talked about the reticular activated system earlier, and that the mind is looking for evidence of that which it believes to be true. Even if what it believes is completely false, it's still looking for evidence of that. One of the ways that I found helped was to make that work for me. And what that meant was I had to be willing to set my mind to go look for things that would validate what it is that I wanted to believe, because I couldn't convince myself. So if I said, I want to believe this about myself, and I had a negative belief, I needed to go to a positive belief. I had to look for evidence of that. And that was what helped me as one of the ways. The other thing I want to say about this, and I think will potentially help anybody doing this, is understanding that you have been set up in a certain way to look at the world. It doesn't mean that is the way the world is. And the ancient teaching said that the mind does not know the difference between that which is real and that which is imagined. Now we know neuroscience has proven that the same areas of your brain light up under an MRI, whether you're imagining it or whether you're experiencing it. That's very important for you to realize. It is the manifestation of that in your brain that makes it real, using all of the senses, imagining how it would smell, how it would feel, etc., etc. However, some of you may have a pushback around this, which is aphantasia. Now, you may not have heard that word before. I certainly wouldn't expect you to. But aphantasia is the lack of ability to visualize. And so what are the alternative sort of neural pathways, James, that someone can use who doesn't seem to be able to visualize them? How do they get around that?
Well, in many ways, this relates to how do you overcome any hardship. You know, if you're missing a limb or you're blind, that requires a different approach. But that doesn't mean something is impossible. It means you have to look at different alternatives. If you have an inability to visualize, then that will not be part of your repertoire. But that does not change your ability to have an idea, an intention. It doesn't limit your ability to write it down. It doesn't limit your ability to read it silently. It doesn't limit your ability to read it aloud. And the requirement, though, is repetition. This is how you lay neural pathways down. So while there may be one of the components not available, the reality is this is a matter of over and over and over utilizing the tools that are available to you to define your intention with clarity so that it gets value tagged. You mentioned that word earlier. Basically, this is embedding your intention into your subconscious so that it has importance. And once that importance is recognized by the subconscious, then this activates various brain networks to have them manifest that intention, starting with, as I mentioned earlier, the default mode network, where that, if you will, intention is further defined and how it relates to you and how it connects to you. And then that essentially activates the task positive network, which then goes through a very clear process of making that intention salient, focusing your attention on the intention, and then your executive control network making what the subconscious desires into reality. And this works best when you're in the right mental state, which means you have engaged your parasympathetic nervous system and not utilizing your sympathetic nervous system, which limits your ability to manifest or decreases the potential for you to manifest.
So I said at the very beginning of the show that the start of the introduction of the book is the universe doesn't give a fuck about you. Tell us about that.
Well, this is a problem and has been associated with manifestation from the beginning, which, as you know, dates back thousands of years. And this is a period of time where we didn't really have knowledge. So we explained phenomenon which we had experienced over years and years with an explanation that at least made sense in regard to our culture. What we do know now, though, is that with a variety of brain imaging tools, we see how the brain works. We see what activates different brain networks or areas of the brain. And as a result, we can much more clearly define what is necessary to activate those brain networks. And really, that's what this book is about. When I said the universe doesn't give a fuck about you, it's because so many people, sadly, and this is where the basis of the law of attraction came from, have this narrative they tell themselves or have been told that if you have positive energy and you release that out in the universe feels this and responds to you and make your dreams come true. And frankly, this is ridiculous. There is nobody out in the universe. There's nobody who gives a shit about you or I. You know, I was talking to the actor John Hamm. I don't know if you know John. He's on a show called Mad Men. So he and I are friends, and we were talking about this, and he said, at best, the universe is indifferent to you. There's nothing out there. And now I know there will be a group of people who say, well, I'm a Christian and I believe X, Y, or Z, or I'm a Muslim, whatever it is. That's fine. That is a belief system that if you want to hold and it helps you in this world and calms you, that's fine. But do not be under any illusion that somebody's going to come and fix life for you. It doesn't work that way. The only person who can change your life or give you happiness is inside of yourself. And that's by training your mind in its best way, based on the science we have today, to manifest your intention. That's not to say there are not external forces that can impact, but it is not the external force that's the decider in the sense of you even coming up with that goal or intention. That is you. The other problem about the law of attraction is some people would sit there and say, well, it didn't happen because you didn't care enough or you didn't practice enough. So there's this sort of self-shaming aspect. No, the reality is sometimes things don't work out. And there are many things that I've been attempting to manifest, if you will, but it doesn't work on my timeline. There are projects I've been working on for over a decade that have not happened yet. Now, what I would say is I never change my belief in the possibility of them happening. And this is this idea of dispositional optimism. I don't have an exact time frame, nor do I expect it will work out exactly as I wish, but I have an unshakable belief that they will occur. And the very fact that you carry that with you keeps your subconscious always attuned to synchronicities that may occur in your environment that will allow those to occur. You know, I've given one example, but there are innumerable examples in my own life that have allowed me, frankly, to be with you today. And based on over and over the reality that these have occurred and based on the neuroscience that is clearly evident, this is very powerful and is real.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that you are going to manifest whatever you're going to manifest. And from my point of view, your life is your manifestation. This is your life. This is your manifestation. You may have consciously or unconsciously manifested it, but you did. I know that I manifest the repetition of my childhood a lot until I stopped. In the context of quantum physics, it's a reflective universe. It's just reflecting back to me whatever I'm putting out there, consciously or unconsciously. And so it just goes to show up, and I get to be accountable for that. And that's what you're saying about it's me. If I'm unconscious, lack awareness of what I'm putting out there, then my mind is, again, looking for evidence of that which it believes to be true, which might not be so great stuff. So we really need to focus in on that. As we sort of come to the end of this part of the show, I want to ask you about this project that you're working on that you mentioned at the end of part one, which was happy.ai. It's a fascinating thing that you're doing. In fact, I was having a conversation with somebody on Friday, very similar subject, but talk to us about this integration of neuroscience with mental health regarding happy AI and leveraging artificial intelligence neuroscience for mental health.
Well, as you know, especially since the pandemic and the nature of Western capitalist society, one, people feel they cannot be authentic, they can't be their true selves, and they're terrified of being judged by other people. As a result, we have an epidemic of stress, anxiety, and depression that's affecting all of our society, which has been aggravated by social media. And in fact, in a survey that was done in the state of California, they asked adolescents what was their ideal mental health app, because there are not even enough therapists to help all the people who are suffering. But the reality is you don't necessarily need therapists, you need people to talk to. But what the adolescents said was they wanted an app that was non-judgmental, empathetic, compassionate, and used an avatar. And the reason is, as I said, people are terrified of being judged by others. And what's interesting is we've developed this over the last 2.5 years, and hopefully it's going to launch in the next few months, is that it combines an emotion assessment engine. And what I mean by that, it utilizes the ability to analyze speech, facial expression, and what we would call sentiment or context of speech to constantly gauge your emotional state. This is then connected to a conversational AI database or knowledge base that contains compassion-focused therapy and psychology that sits on top of, but is not part of an LLM. And the reason that's important is LLMs, large language models such as ChatGPT, can hallucinate or give false information. Being completely self-contained, having created this knowledge base, it doesn't do that or stray from its mission, meaning you can't troll it to do things unrelated to its task. And then the other part of it, which is critical, is it utilizes a human-like avatar to actually have a conversation with you. And the thing about that is, unlike other mental health apps where, let's say, you type in, you cannot get an emotional connection to it. But what's extraordinary, and this is in some ways similar to virtual reality, when you put the glasses on, typically they'll put you over an abyss on a plank or a bridge and tell you to jump off. Even though on a conscious level, you know that it's not real, on a subconscious level, you cannot jump off the plank. And the same is true of a human-like avatar. Once you've connected with it, once you've interacted with it, you cannot not connect with it like a human being, which means you develop a very powerful connection to it, meaning that even if she or he is not there, even texting to it, you know that there's a thing there that represents a human. Now, the great thing about it is, imagine, unlike online therapy, which frankly is expensive and not available on weekends or after 5, where you get this wonderful statement that says, please call 911 if this is a life-threatening emergency. That is not particularly helpful if you're stressed and anxious. It's available 24/7. You can either just talk to it, you can ask for recommendations, it'll do a breathing exercise, it'll do a meditation, it'll refer you to different types of articles. It'll connect you with videos. And the whole point is a recognition that simply having a 10 or 15-minute conversation with somebody who's stressed and anxious, for most people, dissipates those feelings very, very quickly. You don't need a therapist. You simply need to talk to someone who listens to you. And that's really what all of us want. We did a study, actually, where we asked people to use it 10 minutes a day for 1 week. And there's a self-report study where it measures normal 1, 5, extremely severe. In the categories of stress, anxiety, and depression, over 70% of people in each category improved 2 levels with 1 week of use, which is extraordinary. And at least with the data we have to date, unlike, let's say, a Headspace or Calm, where retention levels are around 3% or below, it appears as though the retention levels are 7 to 9%. Which actually for an app is quite amazing. And in fact, in the group of people we did that study with, essentially 100% wanted to continue talking to the app. So I think this has the great potential to be very, very powerful. Now, like every app, you improve it over time, but we've really been amazed with some of the insights that you can get from this.
Is that available now?
Yes, people can sign up for it now for free. Happy, HAPPI.ai, HAPPI.ai. You can sign up for free. We're letting people use it unlimited for the moment because, one, we want to get your feedback to understand how we can continue to improve it. So please feel free to use it. You can add comments, tell what helped you, what didn't help you, what your thoughts are, how it could be improved, and hopefully we'll launch it in the next few months. And for those who are using it now, we'll give you 3 months of free use once we launch.
It's interesting. Do you know Dr. Skip Rizzo?
No, I don't.
He's also in California, and he's doing work with ex-military PTSD using VR sets and VR therapy. And they are showing the same thing. Dr. Chopra has done the same thing too, showing that people actually, particularly young millennials and older Gen Z, prefer that to a person because of exactly what you said. There's no sense of going to be judged. And so they're returning to these systems and getting phenomenal results. And the interesting thing about it is, what I want people to grasp is the connection to what we're talking about with manifestation. The mind does not know the difference between that which is real and that which is imagined using all of the senses. So when you're in that app or you're in that VR set and you're having that experience, you're having a flood of oxytocin bonding with something that you know is not there, but is an intelligence that is communicating with you. And that's really important for you to understand. In fact, it gives you great evidence to say, I know that's not real, yet my bond feels very real. If you've seen that movie, I think it's called Her, where Joaquin Phoenix has this relationship, it's the same thing. Understanding that bond is very real. So this is a great, great piece of technology that we need a lot more of. As you said, we're in an epidemic here. We need a lot more of that. We're coming very close to the end of the show. I want to make sure that people understand more about where they can find you, can find the books, etc., etc. Please tell them where they can find out all those things.
Sure. You can find out the work I do at the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education at Stanford University at ccare.stanford.edu. You can find out about the mental health app at happy, HAPPI.ai. And you can find out about my books and my podcast at jamesrdoty, DOTY.com.
Wonderful. And of course, we'll make sure that all those links are posted in the show notes. Jim, again, thank you so much for being with us. It's always a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of the tribe. Leaders committed to positively shaping the psychological and business landscape know that they've got to tap into what drives human behavior. And you can do that through tapping into the emotional source code. I'm Dov Baron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. Remember, we need your help in staying relevant, so please go to wherever it is you tune into the podcast from and do us a favor. It really helps. Rate, review, and subscribe to this show, and leave us a review. Tell us what you thought of this. Tell us what you got out of this, and make sure you let James know what you got out of it. This is really important. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about what it is that's showing up in your life and whether you can take responsibility for it and own it, that you can take control of your mind and in turn take control of your reality. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, in your life, and in your leadership impact, because you have a magic mind. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm out.